Hey everyone, welcome to Monday Mornings with Dr. Nick, Authentic Leadership in Action. I'm your host, Dr. Nick Davies, and I'm on a quest to learn as much as I can about leadership, specifically School of Leadership. Each week, I meet with leaders across the country and then summarize those meetings in short articles, videos, and a podcast. This right here is a short form podcast on leadership intended to give you tips and advice that you can use in your schools right away. I love the challenges that come with leadership, and I love talking with leaders about their journeys. I'll use everything I learned to continue my personal mission of having a positive impact on people's lives so they can become the best of which they're capable of becoming. So ready or not, here we go into this week's topic. All right. Episode number 8, pay attention. I met with Carol Carter, who's a forward-thinking leader, has started multiple companies, and she was even a vice president at Prentice Hall when she was only 26 years old. She's an international student success speaker and is currently getting ready for her Global Minded conference, which is this June in Denver. So Global Minded is an inclusive success network that is working to close the equity gap. I'm really excited to be at the Global Minded conference this June. You should come join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. I am speaking on one of the education panels focused around mindfulness practices. Carol has also started a company called Lifebound, which trains coaches to help people succeed in personal, academic, and professional areas. We met over Zoom for a fantastic conversation, and we hit on 3 main areas, at least that 3 that I want to share with you. Number 1, pay attention. Number 2, set priorities. And number 3, learn to network. Let's dive into more detail for each of those 3 topics. So first off, pay attention. When we were talking about things that Carol has learned over her career, she talked about how she wished she would have worried less and how things ended up working out how they needed to work out. And so she talked about paying attention to how you're feeling. Worry is a toxic emotion, and there really is no place for it. So when you start to worry, pay attention to that. When you start to fret, pay attention to that. Start to breathe and think about things that you can control as opposed to those that you can't, which is typically what we worry about, things we cannot control. In the same category, Carol also talked about personal habits that can help you. So paying attention to things like how much you're sleeping, paying attention to what you're eating, what you're putting into your body, what you're doing with your body. So paying attention to what kind of exercise you're doing, your mindfulness practices, if you have that, yoga practices, anything like that. Pay attention to what you're doing with your body. And lastly, pay attention to how you align with your colleagues. A lot of times the stress that we have comes from our work environments. And so knowing how you align with your colleagues can be really important. You don't necessarily have to align with all of your colleagues, but it's just good to understand how you do. Sometimes if you have the ability, it might be time to find someone new to work with. We don't always have that opportunity, but if you do, maybe once you start noticing these things, once you start paying attention, it is something that you can start to work towards. Second main topic, set priorities. Setting priorities has been a key professional success habit for Carol over the course of her career. She talks about getting up very early each morning, 4:30 for her, which I commend her. I'm a big early riser myself. I've got some good buddies on the East Coast who I will frequently text early in the morning, and we'll try to see who's getting up first, either me on the West Coast or them on the East Coast. But when you're getting up, look at your day, decide what needs to be done and what needs to be accomplished, and start shifting or looking at your list and comparing it with what needs to be accomplished and what is nice to be accomplished. As she was talking about this, I couldn't help think about the Eisenhower matrix, that matrix made famous by Stephen Covey, where you have the urgent and important in one quadrant, the important in another, the urgent and not necessarily important in a bottom quadrant, and lastly, the just not important. So if you look at those 4 areas, that's a great way to start your day. And if you haven't spent a lot of time on learning how to set priorities, I strongly encourage you to read the book Free to Focus by Michael Hyatt. Great way to really get your day planned out, your week planned out, your months planned out. Couldn't recommend that more if we're thinking about setting priorities. And lastly, key topic, learn to network. We didn't spend a ton of time on this topic, but Carol mentioned it as something that was very important. It's networking, marketing, branding, all of those are absolutely huge in any professional career. So even if you're not quite sure how to do some of those things, she talked about connecting and attaching yourself with people who are good at those and making sure that you're adding value to those people along the way. Support each other. You might compliment someone who's really good at networking because you're better at something that they are not. Those connections that you make can have huge implications down the road. You never know where they're going to lead. Carol had a couple book recommendations for me as well. The Power Broker by Robert Caro and The Orphan Train by Christina Baker Klein. I also asked Carol at the end of our conversation if she was interviewing leaders like I was, does she have a question she thinks would be interesting to ask people? And she quickly came up with, what is the most important thing you can do to improve the world, with a follow-up of what are you willing to do to make that happen? I thought that was a really interesting question. So then I asked it back to Carol, and she talked about how she is driven to produce more equitable outcomes for students. And she does that by her businesses. So that's her life work. Her life work with her current 2 companies that she's working in the conference that she's running in June. That is what she's trying to do, create more equitable outcomes for students. So thank you, Carol, so much for your time. Really excited to be joining you this June. Hope you who are listening will join us as well in Denver for the Global Minded Conference. Thanks for listening, everyone. Please rate and review this episode on whatever platform you use to listen to it. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Who in your network do you know that could benefit from the message from today? Please share this with them. If you want to talk more about this topic or any others I've talked about in the past, reach out to me through LinkedIn. You can find me, Nick Davies, PhD. We see each other again next week. Thanks.